Ed Balls at his office in Westminster.
How concerned are you about the anger among some trade unions as to what you're doing in effectively joining the government and agreeing to cap public sector pay?
Well, I'm concerned at rising unemployment, a flatlining economy, the inheritance which Labour will face in 3 years' time, which is very difficult, and the need for us to face up to difficult choices. And we can't now make commitments on spending or tax rises to reverse what the Conservatives are doing, but nor can we say with any credibility in the next 2 years we think that higher pay for public sector workers should come before jobs. We can't make that argument. I'm afraid George Osborne, I think, intended not to continue with this pay freeze. His policy has failed. I'm afraid there is now no choice, if we're going to keep unemployment down in the future, to say jobs will have to come before pay.
As you well know, you will lose friends over this, lose supporters, you will lose people who back your party to the tune of 80% of what your party needs just to survive, because that's where the unions come in. Why should trade unions agree to do that, pay you, while you're doing what the government are doing to them for free?
Look, we're the opposition, and the government, a Conservative-led government, is making terrible mistakes on the economy. They're cutting too far and too fast. Unemployment is rising. It's having a very difficult impact upon people working in the private and in the public sector.
And you're agreeing with the policy broadly.
But Labour cannot, from opposition, change that until we're in government. And to be in government, we've got to set out an alternative, but it's got to be a credible alternative. And if we come along and say, look, we could be popular with the trade unions today by saying we'll spend more, we'll tax less, let's pay people more. But if people say, well, that doesn't add up, that doesn't make us credible, it makes us less credible. What we've got to do is say there is a better way, a fairer way to get the deficit down, to get the economy moving, to get growth and jobs back,
right.
A 5-point plan for jobs and growth, tough decisions on pay, but also done in a fair way.
But just on the specific point, do you take seriously the threat from the GMB to disaffiliate from the Labour Party?
Well, I don't want the GMB or Unite to disaffiliate from the Labour Party.
So you take it seriously? You do take this?
Look, I want people to be working together for a stronger, fairer future for our country. But we can't make our policy on the basis of that. We're going to make our policy on what would be the best way forward for the country, and what could show Labour in a credible way can make difficult decisions when we will be faced with clearing up a very difficult Tory economic mess which we see all around us at the moment.
Can you also understand why there's anger at you personally? Because for many people, particularly in the trade union movement, but not just confined to that, you were the kind of golden boy for the intellectual case for Keynesianism. You were the person who said these cuts are wrong, they're going to choke off growth. You were the person who said that even Alistair Darling's cuts might be too far, too fast. And now you're saying my starting point is I'm afraid we're going to have to keep all these cuts. That is a big U-turn.
No, I am saying today, as I said a year ago and 2 years ago, the deficit must come down. There have to be hard choices on tax and spend, but if you go too far and too fast, as I warned consistently over the last year and a half, the danger was it wouldn't work. The economy would flatline, unemployment would go up, and in the autumn statement, George Osborne had to admit, not only all that he's borrowing £158 billion more. The problem I've got is I can't wave a magic wand and sort of just blow away that inheritance. Our task as Labour will be to clear up George Osborne's economic mess.
But you also said in a speech to Bloomberg in August 2010, when you were running for the leadership of the party, adopting the consensus view may be the easy and safe thing to do, but it does not make you right. Now you're adopting the consensus view. You're adopting the view that is held in among the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives, effectively, that there is no alternative to these cuts.
But Gavin, that is 100% emphatically wrong. I think George Osborne should change course now. His cuts are too far and too fast. He's crushing growth. The reason our interest rates are so low is because he's getting it wrong. Unemployment is going up. He should have now, as we've advocated, a temporary cut in VAT, boost public investment, repeat the bank bonus tax.
Why is it then that the unions apparently don't get this distinction? Len McCluskey of Unite saying in The Guardian today, the real points of differentiation between Labour and the government on the economy are now very hard to identify. You haven't even sophisticated union leaders don't understand what you're doing then.
Well, look, I read that article, and I think on that, Len McCluskey is plain wrong. I argued for action now to boost growth and jobs, and I argued for long-term reform to make our economy stronger and fairer.
On the one hand, you're saying, I'm against these cuts in general, they're wrong, but in specifics, I can't tell you anyone I would reverse.
Well,
that's a very complicated message to get across to people.
Well, abolishing the Future Jobs Fund and the EMA looked to George Osborne as if it would save money, but it's contributed to rising youth unemployment, which is costing our country more in benefits.
So you would reverse that?
You'd reverse that? That's why we're saying have the bank bonus tax right now, raise £2 billion and use that for youth jobs. What I can't do is make a commitment now that I will know how much money we have and there will be less money in 3 years' time.
If you pursue that, you're going to say, well, that's fine, we'll just have to see how things turn out in 3 years' time. Why should we listen to you in the next 3 years?
Because George Osborne is doggedly sticking with a plan which is failing. He should have changed course 6 months ago. He still can today. He still can in the run-up to the budget. And I will say to him, day by day, week by week, the approach he's taking, too far and too fast, is unfair and not working. The longer he persists, the bigger the pain, the bigger the damage, and the greater the damage in inheritance we will face because of his mistakes.
Let me put you one specific issue which has come up today, which is the question of the disability living allowance. The government says, by getting rid of this, they will save some 20%, they hope. You cannot say to us tonight, can you, that you would reverse that in 3 years' time?
If I said that to you today, you would say, quite rightly, how do you know what you'll be able to afford in 3 years' time?
But you're opposing it today, and you're getting your MPs and your peers to oppose it. Isn't that a very, very difficult message? That's my point, which is you are saying we oppose it, but we can't say we're going to reverse it.
Well, look, let me give you another example. The VAT rise last year to 20% was an unfair tax rise which choked off the recovery and has flatlined the economy, will probably lead to more, has led to more borrowing in the economy. It was the wrong thing to do. They shouldn't have done it. We're calling for a temporary VAT cut now. But can I say to you today and to your viewers, I promise as Shadow Chancellor in 3 years' time, we can definitely reverse that. I will not make uncosted commitments. I can't pay for it until I know the state of the economy.
As you know, the disability living allowance is called by Liam Byrne, your Shadow Cabinet colleague, the basic line of British decency. This is a gut issue for your supporters.
Yes.
Gut issue for many people. If you can't help the disabled, the poor, the most deserving people in this country, many Labour Party supporters would say, well, what's the point? But you can't commit to that, can you?
What, in 3 years' time?
You can't.
Absolutely not. As a Shadow Chancellor, I've got to know that our manifesto has been properly costed in the context of the times and can be paid for. I think what they're doing on disability living allowance is a big mistake and it's unfair. The benefits cap will lead to more homelessness the way it's been designed. I think the abolition of the Future Jobs Fund will make youth unemployment higher. I think taking tax credits away from families on £25,000 hitting women harder is unfair, wrong and damaging. But the question you're asking me is, can I, to your viewers, make promises now? About 3 years' time, Nick Clegg made promises. You remember that promise? Not to raise VAT. He broke his promises straight after the election. I'm not going to make that mistake because that is wrong and not the right way to do politics. I won't make that mistake.
Balls, thank you very much.